Welcome back to America's Forum here on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman. We're keeping our eyes on the crisis in the Ukraine. Russia has vowed to keep its troops in the Ukraine to protect the country's own interests until the political situation has been, what they say, normalized. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov went as far as to say that Russia was defending human rights. Who are they defending themselves against? They say ultra-nationalist threats. Russia has found itself in de facto military control of the Crimea region despite Western condemnation. So what does this all mean for our interests here at home? Joining me right now to discuss this is former FBI agent, counterterrorism expert, Chad Jenkins. Chad, good to have you here with us. J.D. Hayworth, former congressman, back with us as well. We'll have some questions from him. But Chad, first, we're coming up here on the one-year anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombings. Right after that happened, we were taking a look at Dagestan, the Tsarnaev brothers, and possible cooperation with Russia on counterterrorism. What happened to all that?
Well, possible is the great word of choice. Now, nothing happened in Sochi, or at least not thus far. But that crosstalk between the United States and Russian intelligence was very steadfast, and it was very hardened. Everybody was kind of talking out of the side of their mouth and really didn't want to address the fact that we weren't getting all that much intelligence from the Russian authorities during the lead up to the Sochi Olympics.
How is this, potentially, what does this expose us to? I mean, obviously we do have some shared enemies, these Islamist extremists in Eurasia and Eastern Europe.
Well, we have Islamic extremists all over the world that pose a threat to the United States. And so I think right at this point in time, we need to take a look at how we best defend ourselves and our national security. And not only Islamic extremism, but now we have Russia playing a vital role in deterring the security and the outset of the United States interests. So this is a pivotal moment in which we're about to embark upon in the United States.
Chad, taking a look at the Financial Times, the publication today called President Obama, quote, the appeaser in chief. Now that's pretty strong language, and yet that seems to be a takeaway for many of our allies and adversaries alike. I want to turn the question a little bit, given your resume, West Point grad, FBI counterterrorism, and all that goes into the FBI. My old colleague Mike Rogers, likewise a West Pointer, likewise a former FBI agent, what mindset does Mike Rogers bring to this whole affair as now chairman of the House Select Committee on Intelligence?
Well, Mr. Rogers, obviously I saw him yesterday morning, and his insight into the nuances that take place, and really behind the scenes that we're not privy to that information right now. I think it's an individual that, thank goodness, he's in that predicament. He's in that position. He's been there. He's walked the walk, and now he sees it from that standpoint. And he's invaluable to the national security of the United States, and really taking it to the people and letting them know, hey, here's our threats, here's our vulnerabilities, and this is the best recourses we can do in order to protect our interests. And he does a very well job of that.
Now, there's been obviously strained communication between Congress and the White House. Is this a situation, J.D., when you kind of put the pettier differences aside, because there's obviously a bigger concern here?
Well, there's an initial situation, and you may recall very circumspect criticism, for example, in the wake of the Iranian hostage crisis in Tehran, where initially the Republican Party gave President Carter a whole lot of room to operate. But there is a calendar that is inherently political, and initially you will see some forbearance, but then there will be far more criticism. And as we mentioned earlier in this program, of course, the aforementioned Mike Rogers, the chairman of intelligence, said, Mr. Putin has been playing chess, Mr. Obama has been playing marbles. That sets the theme, but as the political calendar moves along, and perhaps more ominously in terms of foreign policy, as the Russians continue to roll into the Ukraine, the criticism will become much more specific and will become much louder in volume.
And we know we'll hear the red line on Iran comment come up over and over again on the campaign trail. But when politics gets involved, Chad, in situations like this, how does that complicate things for a guy like yourself who worked with the FBI and counterterrorism?
Well, at the end of the day, not only that from a domestic standpoint, but then my 4 deployments as an Army Ranger to Iraq and seeing that play out. And now look at our foreign policy, our withdrawal from Iraq, and now they're flying the Al-Qaeda flags in Fallujah, a place that I spent a year at, and Ramadi. So when you see all those things transpire and the politicalness of those decisions, yes, that's the necessary evil. But for a guy who wants to provide the security to this country, it's difficult to look at that and just focus on, you know, your task at hand.
And you know, as we look at the situation with how we approach Vladimir Putin and all this, we heard Mike Rogers say, you know, we can't just send some Navy ships into the Black Sea. That might be dangerous. What are some of the options that we haven't heard mentioned? We heard economic sanctions talked about, but what do you think that hasn't been talked about enough?
I'd love to take this if you don't mind, JD.
Sure, go ahead, Chad.
I think right now, if you look at it, economic sanctions, I mean, that's laughable. For the simple fact, we've just relinquished our economic sanctions on Iran. Iran can then go ahead and fund Russia right behind us. So, I mean, to say that we're going to impose visa threats, well, or visa sanctions against them and not provide visas, well, then they'll just go to Belarus or Moldova, and those individuals who want to get to the United States will just pick up those passports and use them to get here to the United States. So we're in a very difficult predicament. So it'll be interesting to see what other red lines or grave mistakes that we're going to say have been crossed, and what we do or lack there to do.
And JD, in Congress, there's bipartisan support for pushing back against Russia in the G8 talks that are coming up in Sochi, Russia, as well. A more definitive step that the administration could take. Should you pull out right now and just say we're not going hands down?
Absolutely. What should happen in Sochi is a no-show, because just think about the atmospherics and the perception. A couple of weeks ago, the world goes to Sochi for the Olympics. In the intervening 2 weeks, Putin invades the Ukraine. The answer, and this should be a very easy call on the G8 summit, it should be canceled today.
Yeah, that's a pretty black and white issue, Chad. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, but it's funny, you know, when I was prepping for this today, where did I go to? I went to the Bible and to Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, talking about Magog and the leader of Russia coming down and posing a threat to Israel at one point, with an enemy to the east who is in line with Russia right now, no more than closer than Iran. Back then it was Persia. So, I mean, we are talking about some things that it's already written how it's going to play out. And guess what? The United States' role in that is to sit on the sidelines and watch.
I just got goosebumps hearing you talk about that interesting perspective. We've got much more to come. We'll have Chad back. We want to talk about a situation in China where there was a mass stabbing, an interesting situation there. Plus, we'll have more on Afghanistan. Chad and JD when we come right back after this. Of course, we want to hear from you. You can tweet me your questions directly at JohnB_Newsmax, or any of us here at the program at Newsmax TV. We'll get JD one of those Twitter handles if he's got one up on the screen here soon.
I'm going to get a brand new one.
All right, we'll be right back with more here after this.